What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. And today, guys, I want to be talking to you about high and low exercise selection. Not so much high versus low exercise selection in terms of which is better, but which may be best for you based upon your goals, your level as a lifter, and all kinds of different factors that we're going to be going over. Now, on this channel, we have already discussed things like how to properly incorporate isolation work to build up your weak points. I've done an entire video over how to properly incorporate variation and accessory work, both compound and isolation, to help build up your weak points on a specific lift, whether it's, the bench, squat, deadlift, overhead press, things of that nature. So what I want to discuss in today's video specifically is really going over, okay, is there such thing as having too many movements in a given day? Is there such thing as my exercise selection being too high? Or is there such thing as it being too low? Is there like, a nice little sweet spot in the middle like there usually is with most of these things? Or do I need to stick with one or the other based upon what I'm trying to do? So getting right into it, guys, here's the big thing. In terms of low exercise selection versus high exercise selection, it's not, and keep in mind when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about somebody where, every few weeks or every training cycles, you kind of cycle through different movements. I'm talking about, the person who, throughout the week is really focusing on maybe like, 6 to 10 movements throughout the week versus the person that's focusing on 20 different movements throughout the week. That's what we're kind of talking about. So starting at the very bottom, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but in terms of like the way that the levels work, is our beginner lifters. And if you aren't sure, guys, if you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced lifter, in the description down below, I'll have the link to my video that goes over how to really determine if you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced lifters, because a lot of people have misconceptions that it's purely based off how much you can lift or purely based off how long you've been lifting, but there's other factors that go into it, so you guys be sure to check that out. But anyway, as a beginner, guys, in all actuality, your exercise selection does not need to be that high. Like, I've done videos before where I talk about like, mistakes that beginners make, and oftentimes it's the fact that they're trying to throw in too many movements at once. They're trying to do all the isolation moves in the world, all the accessory work in the world. They're basically trying to throw every movement they can in the muscle group in order to make sure that it definitely grows, when in actuality, it's very counterproductive. They're hindering themselves. They do that because they'll maybe see higher, intermediate, or more advanced lifters using, a different selection of exercises. But the reality is those lifters have already established their base, and that's what you need to be focused on as a beginner, is establishing your base, focusing on a handful of big movements, like the bench press, the squat, deadlift, overhead press, some type of barbell row, some type of pull, whether it's a lat pull down, a weighted pull up, just covering all those major movement patterns, focusing on those big movements and just getting stronger on them. You guys already know by now with this channel the connection between strength and hypertrophy. You can never truly separate the two. You can focus in on one a little bit more than the other, but it all goes hand in hand. If you're gradually getting bigger, you are also gradually getting stronger. If you are getting stronger, you're also getting bigger. So even if you try to focus a little bit more on strength, there's still going to be hypertrophy gains that come with that. Even if you choose to focus on hypertrophy, there's still going to be strength gains that come with that. And this is especially true for beginners. It's like this close of a connection when it comes to beginners. As they are getting stronger, they will get bigger. So focus on those big movements. There's no a reason for you to be doing like, 3 to 4 different compound movements for your chest, 3 to 4 different compound movements for your back, 3 to 4 different compound movements for your legs, and then trying to throw in a bunch of isolation and accessory work as well. Focus in on those big movements and maybe have 1 or 2 accessory movements at the end to focus on something. For example, if you're saying you're doing full body 3 times a week, then maybe at the end of one full body day, you can do a tricep isolation, a bicep isolation. At the end of another full body day, you can do, a quad isolation movement, a hamstring isolation movement. And at the end of the third one, you can do some shoulder isolation work, such as lateral raises or face pulls, which is something that I would suggest for beginners in general, just because, things like face pulls and focusing on the rear delt is great for rotator cuff health. It's a habit you want to get into early, as well as the fact that there aren't a whole lot of compounds that really just hit those heads of the delt the way that the isolation movements do. So stuff like that is okay, but as a beginner, you need to be focused on pretty much low exercise selection and getting strong on those specific movements. Even if it's not necessarily like the bench, maybe you choose to do weighted dips instead of the bench, or maybe for whatever reason you choose to focus on leg press instead of the squat. So I got to get into how optimal I think that is, but the point is picking a handful of specific movements for each muscle group and getting stronger on those. Now, as you become an intermediate lifter, this is where more isolation accessory work is probably going to be needed. In fact, I can almost guarantee you that it will be, because as you become a more intermediate lifter, after you build your base, you're going to have a better idea of what your weak points are. You're going to have a better idea of, you know what? I'm actually like maybe my triceps lag compared to my biceps. Maybe my hamstrings really lag compared to my quads. And when it comes to things like that, that is when you want to start incorporating, isolation work, or even if it's not isolation work, just more accessory work. But let's say that you know that your upper chest lags a little bit. Well, in that case, after you do maybe your main pressing movement, whether it's bench press or dips, maybe you throw in some incline dumbbell press after that. Or maybe you even decide to start focusing on incline press and then do your flat press or your weighted dips after that. That's okay. As an intermediate level, it's not so much that you're suddenly going to an extremely high exercise selection, but your exercise selection is going to be more than what it was as a beginner, for the mere fact that you're going to have more weak points to work on, as well as the fact, guys, keep this in mind, and this is going to relate to a video that I'll be doing later this week in terms of volume. As you become a more advanced lifter over time, I don't mean you're an advanced lifter, but as you go from beginner to intermediate, intermediate to higher intermediate to advanced lifter, it's gonna take more overall workload for you to grow and get stronger, more total volume. And it's sometimes a lot easier to do that, to produce more volume, but still keeping in mind recovery if we add in movements that aren't going to impact our recovery quite as much. So for example, if you know that, you know what, just the amount of bench press I was doing as a beginner isn't enough volume now to grow my chest, rather than trying to double the workload on the bench press, which can really eat at your recovery, it's okay then to come in and incorporate something like maybe you incorporate chest flies, or like I said, an incline dumbbell press, or just some type of movement that's not going to be quite as taxing on your recovery as with the bench presses. That makes sense. Why? Because you need more total workload, but you're not trying to eat away at your recovery too much either, because there's no point in producing more workload if it's something you can't recover from. So in that case, it makes sense to start incorporating different lifts. And then, like I said in the video where we already went over, like, you know, weak point training, there's going to be times where you'll work on different variations of a movement or incorporate accessory work for the mere fact of, hey, I'm trying to get stronger on this movement. And of course, the main focus to get stronger on a movement is to do the movement itself. But if you have certain weak points with that movement, that's when you want to get into the idea of maybe working on certain variations to help you with that. Not that the variation replaces the main movement, but like I said, I'll have that video linked in the description down below as well, so you guys can check out full details on that. But as an intermediate lifter, that's when you're going to start having a little bit more variety with your exercise selection. Now, as an advanced lifter, this is where, you know, this isn't even gonna really apply to most of you watching this right now. It doesn't even apply to me. I see myself as like more on the high-end intermediate lifter than an advanced lifter, but this is where, honestly, I'm a big believer in you kind of got to do what you enjoy. And what I mean by that is when you, like, you know, build the base, when you're hitting like very, very strong numbers on all your lifts and you're entering into that advanced stage, it really just comes down to, once again, still producing enough total workload that you need, but making sure you can recover from it. And this is where higher exercise selection actually makes a whole lot of sense, for the same reason it does with intermediates, but even more so, because as an advanced lifter, you have to do so much workload just to see any type of progress. But you have to be careful, because if you go over that max recoverable volume and you push it too much, you're just gonna regress. It's gonna push you back. You're not gonna progress. You're not even gonna necessarily stay the same. You might actually lose strength. You can even lose muscle mass because of just the amount of workload that you're doing. So you have to be really careful with that. So that's where higher exercise selection makes sense, to help prevent things like overuse injury, and to help, really just help advanced lifters psychologically. If you're an advanced lifter and you've been lifting for, 10, 15 years, you're probably getting to the point where you may get tired of doing the same movements over and over and over again. So every few weeks you may like switch things out, or you may even be someone where, if you're running a certain style of concurrent training, you're switching lifts out more frequently. And in this case, that's not a big deal. Even though I always tell you guys you want to have specificity of training, it's hard to get stronger on a movement if you're constantly cycling things in and out over and over and over. When you're at a more advanced level, you're so strong on those lifts to where it doesn't really necessarily matter. You're just trying to cycle things out to keep yourself, feeling fresh psychologically. And so long as you program things correctly with how you cycle things out, you can still get stronger on the lift. It's not like you abandon bench press for 3-6 months at a time, then come back to it and expect to be stronger on it. That's not necessarily the case. But if you cycle things out every 3 weeks, but you eventually come back around to those same select movements that you started with, that's a little bit different. But in actuality, guys, as you become more advanced, higher exercise selection makes sense for that reason. But even then, you have to be careful, because there's a lot of advanced lifters who do still just focus on specific movements. Reason being, once again, that specificity of training. That's why I said what your goals are depends. If you're someone where your goal overall is really just like, I don't necessarily care about getting stronger specific movements, I'm just really trying to, make my training enjoyable and build what very, very little muscle I still can, because as you guys know, due to diminished returns, the amount of muscle you're gonna build from year to year, especially advanced lifter, is very small. You're still building, but it's such an insignificant amount that you can barely see any difference. So But if that's still your goal, then cycling through movements makes more sense. However, if you're an advanced lifter and you're, say, a power lifter, there's no reason why you should never be doing bench, squat, and deadlift. You're still gonna focus on those. You may have a little bit more variation in accessory work than somebody else has to, just because you've already gotten your base with that lift so strong where you have to incorporate these different methods to continue getting stronger with it. However, the reality is that you're still gonna focus on those lifts, because if you just abandon those lifts altogether, you're not gonna see a whole lot of progression on them, especially as an advanced lifter. It's not like, you know, beginner and intermediate lifters where we can step away from a lift for a little bit, but if we're still getting the muscles involved stronger, we can come back and probably get a lot stronger on it, just because as an advanced lifter, a lot of the strength that you're building at that point has a lot more to do with the movement pattern itself and your central nervous system and your neuromuscular recruitment, things related specifically to that lift. So really, guys, it's not about low exercise selection versus high exercise selection. It just comes down to what I preached on this channel so much, having a why for every single thing that you do. Don't just throw movements into your routine just for the sake of doing it or because you see somebody else doing it because you think it's cool. Have a reason for everything that you're doing. For every movement that's in your program, that's in your routine, it needs to be there for a reason, whether it's because it's a main movement you're focused on trying to get stronger on, whether it's an accessory movement that's gonna assist you in getting stronger on a main movement, or whether it's just an accessory movement to help you with a weak point in your physique. There needs to be a reason for what you're doing. And then you have to keep in mind of the fact that movement selection in general matters. Some movements are gonna be better than others. If your primary goal is, hey, I'm really trying to put some mass on my legs, but you're doing, you know, let's say you're doing leg extensions and leg curls and leg press, you're doing all these different things, throwing all these different movements in, well, keep in mind that your time is precious. There's only so much time in a day. And once again, you have to think about total workload and what you can recover from. You wanna maximize each session that you have. You wanna maximize the time you have and maximize the workload that you're using. So for that reason, be smarter with your exercise selection. If you're having trouble putting mass on your legs, and you're doing all these different movements, but you're not even squatting, that's a huge problem right there. I'm not one of those people that says you have to squat to build big legs, but you are gonna build big legs a lot faster if squats are involved. I understand if you have some type of issue to where you can't, that's a little bit different. But if you are able to squat, then you need to make sure you're squatting. That's the reason, that's the thing, guys. A lot of people get dogmatic with these, you know, the big moves like bench, squat, and deadlift because of like powerlifting. I'm not being dogmatic in terms of like, no, they're the big three, do them because of the big three. No, I'm talking about the fact that these are time-tested movements that have been proven to help you with most goals, whether it's athletic, whether it's putting on strength, muscle mass. That's why they're such good movements, because they're, what do we say on the channel? Bang for your buck movements. And that's why you wanna make sure you're focusing on that. So in terms of, you know, low versus high exercise selection, you always need to be aware of just the exercise selection in general. I don't care if you're doing 6 movements or 10 movements. If you're doing 6 movements or 10 movements, you always need to know what those movements are for and make sure that they are giving you the most bang for your buck in relation to your specific goals. But yeah, guys, I just wanted to clarify that because a lot of people seem to think it has to be one or the other, but a lot of it is a matter of if you can justify why you're incorporating the movements that you are, and more importantly, you're able to adequately recover, because it makes way more sense to do fewer movements that are bang for your buck movements where you can recover than to do like, you know, 20 different movements where it's just really focusing on one little thing, but you have to put them all together to get the most bang for your buck, but then it's just eating away at your recovery. So just keep that in mind, guys. Those are the main things to keep in mind. Have a why for every movement that you're doing, and always keep in mind the total workload you're able to produce and what you're able to recover from. If you're able to do that, then regardless if you have a really, you know, low exercise selection or focus on high exercise selection or somewhere in between, then you're gonna be able to see results and progression. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the topic, guys. Now, to finish this video off, I just want to say thank you all so much for 7,000 subs, guys. It's still amazing to think that this channel has only been out for a little bit over a year. It was a year in October. So to reach 7,000 subs is truly a blessing. You guys already know how much I appreciate you. You guys already know this channel is for you. So something that I want to start doing, especially to thank those of you who take the time to actually like the video, to share the video, and who watch all the way to the end, because, you know, I appreciate that. It takes time out of my day to make these videos, and even though I enjoy doing it and I wanted to help you guys out, it means a lot to me that you guys take the time to actually watch them all the way through. So what I'm gonna start doing, guys, is whenever I know that I have a few informative topics coming up, I'm gonna let you guys decide, those of you who watch all the way to the end, because that's when I'm gonna be announcing the topics at the end, I'm gonna let you guys decide which video you wanna see next. So your options for this week, and mind you, I might get to both of these this week, but which ones would you guys want to see first? Do you want to see a video where I go over specific tools to really help you accurately track your body composition, where I'm gonna basically talk about 3 things you really should be doing so you can really track your progression as closely as possible. Or if you wanna see the video that I mentioned where I really start talking about volume more in depth. I've done a video over volume and how, like, you know, how much you do varies from person to person, but this one's specifically gonna go into things like your minimum effective volume, your max recoverable volume, your adaptive volume, things like that, and kind of how to figure all that out. So you guys let me know in the comments down below which video that you guys would like to see next. I appreciate all of you. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you did. If you did not, leave a comment down below. Let me know what I can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch y'all later.